Anusha. Anusha. Yeah. Got my little queen here with me. Let y'all see her. Anusha. Here. Here. Look, Anusha. Look. So, I just wanted to take a moment and build about the science itself. So science comes from the Latin root sire, which means to know. So a scientist of life is a person who is dedicated to knowing about the various different aspects of life. Reason why I wanted to just build about science itself is, as you can see, my little queen right here, she is learning to investigate the world through sensory exploration. So all of us typically come into this physical plane with five senses. She's at a phase in her development where she's attending the world and getting a sensory idea of what it is through the sense of taste, as well as touch, sight, hearing, smell. So there's a difference between being born and incarnation. So like all children, she was incarnated, meaning greater is thee or the consciousness within you than this form that is within the world. So as incarnated consciousness, she's learning to use this form. And it is through her sensory exploration of the world that she develops the capacity to use this form. Another way of referring to the form is a physical vehicle. So imagine it as if you get a brand new vehicle, you're sitting inside of the vehicle, you're figuring out how all of the bells and whistles work, turning on the radio, checking out the windows, this, that, and third. She's going through the exact developmental phases right now. She's learning how this form functions. Right? So in the process of attending the world, she's also learning about the laws that define the underlying significance of the world. What does that mean? Well, through the exploration of her five senses, she's also learning, what to put in her mouth, what she shouldn't put in her mouth, She's learning to delineate or distinguish things that she's seeing through the sense of smell, hearing, touch, all of her senses. So from incarnation or so-called birth up until about 6 years old, that phase of the formative years is the most critical part of her growth and development, because the brain is about 95% developed by the time she reaches the age of 6 or equality. Right? So what that essentially means is her sensory exploration from incarnation or birth up until that point of 6 years old, you get a good sense of how a determined idea is being made manifest. You get a good sense of identity. So oftentimes you hear this conversation about the difference between nature and nurture. Both play a critical role in the growth and development of a child. And because her brain is going to be 95% developed, what is impressed upon her on a cognitive level becomes the actual brain architecture that sets a trajectory psychologically, socially, potentially, economically, of where she eventually end up in life. It's not fixed, but it sets a trajectory, right? And if you see certain things that are going on in a child's growth and development, especially in the earlier years, it's important to get involved to redirect them as soon as possible, to redirect the trajectory or the direction that they're heading in. One of the things that we say in the 5% is that 85% are easily led in the wrong direction and hard to be led in the right direction. That's talking about trajectory. And oftentimes, children at this stage of their growth and development are not given the proper resources or tools, where they may be born into an environment where there's a chronic scarcity of resources that doesn't reinforce their growth and development, or they may not have adults around them who are aware of developmentally appropriate practices in order to help them in their growth and development. Right? Right? Huh? Huh? Say peace. So peace. So yeah, so as she gets older, her brain is going to go through a phase or a process known as synaptic pruning. Yeah. So her brain is firing on all cylinders right now with just the stimulus from the environment, and then also how she explores the world. Yeah, so how she explores the world from a sensory perspective. That's constructing her brain architecture. So because she's making all of these synaptic connections, the brain goes through a process known as synaptic pruning to help her brain function more efficiently and effectively. So you have to ask yourself a question as a parent or a guardian, as an adult. What are we exposing our children to in these formative years to help construct proper brain architecture, so that when her brain or his brain goes through that process of synaptic pruning, what is going to be left in order to encourage the most effective and efficient functioning of this being. So we have to be critically involved in that process and not leave the driving to others. Because as we can see, just on a national level, education is not primary or what is the most important thing when it comes to national government, regional, as well as a lot of local governments. So it's really on us as parents, guardians, caretakers to do what we can in order to help prepare our next generation, because they're going to be the ambassadors of a future that should be greater than what we see right now. And that's not an indictment to say that everything we see right now is negative. We should be striving for perfection or growth and development. And the best way that we can do that is to start here right now with our present generation and preparing them to be stewards. Yeah. Yeah. Stewards of a better society. Right? Yeah. So going back to what I was mentioning about developmentally appropriate practices, children naturally go through different phases when it comes to the development of them in a sensory way. So, for example, Anusha's only 4 months old, and developmentally, she's advanced in many ways. So some children, once they get to a certain phase in their growth and development, they learn to associate senses. They learn to see the relationship between sight as well as sound. So earlier in a child's growth and development, when they hear a sound in the environment, they may not look to where the sound is coming from because they have not developed the capacity to link or relate those senses yet. It is only over a little bit of time where they begin to develop the capacity to, they hear a sound over here, they can look. Or if they hear their name being called from over there, they'll look. Her in her development, she's already at that phase. So there are certain developmentally appropriate practices, things that you can do and learn to encourage the development of our children in a sensory way. So you see how she looked to where the sound was coming from? She's only 4 months old, and she has the capacity to do that, right? So oftentimes with parents, guardians, and caretakers, we may not be aware of what is developmentally appropriate in terms of where a child is at in their growth and development. She's also starting to learn just motor skills in terms of holding objects, you know? So at her particular age, you see that? She's learning how to do that now. So she's not in a stage in her growth and development where she can pick up a cup and start drinking out of it. She has to learn that, which means she has to learn the development of the form. So that's one thing that I would encourage parents, guardians, caretakers to do. Learn about developmentally appropriate practices, things that you can learn and do to help in the growth and development of our children, right? So being in this phase right now called the formative years, it's also the pre-verbal years. So she's not able to communicate yet, but through the the exploration of her five senses in attending the world from the stimulus around her, she's going to start learning the capacity to actually communicate or articulate what she sees, hears, smells, tastes, and touch when it comes to the stimulus in the environment, right? So in these pre-verbal years, her part of her idea of the world around her is inverse, which essentially means is because she's in a pre-verbal stage of her development, how she perceives the world on a sensory level is how the world responds to her. So, for example, in exercise known as serve and return, right? If I were to sit there and be angry all the time, or if she does something, I do that, she's going to receive information from me that whatever it is that she did, this is the response, or this is what it actually means. So it's the same exact thing if I was happy and joyous and engaging with her. You know, based upon what she does, it's almost like if you were in an alien world and you were examining that world on a sensory level. You're poking, you're prodding things, you're looking at things under a microscope, you may be touching things, you're smelling things. It's what you see, it's what you hear. It's the exact same process. You know, she spent 9 months in another world, in her mother's womb, and then she was born into this world. So another part of that, in terms of being incarnated consciousness and being in this form, is it's also a process of triple stage darkness. And one of the things that we talk about in terms of triple stage darkness is we talk about how the universe is created. It's a form of a creation story. So in science, you learn that matter is neither created nor destroyed. So prior to time, prior to when there was a universe, there was just undifferentiated substance, matter, that is also equivalent to energy. Once it moves times the speed of light squared. But that state of complete darkness is equivalent to a first layer of darkness. The second layer of darkness is what you consider to be night, because it's the separation between light and darkness. What we see at nighttime is not the first layer of darkness. What we see at nighttime is just the absence of light. So that is material darkness that we see at nighttime. I'm talking about immaterial darkness, dark matter. So those are basically the first 2 layers when it comes to the creation story of how this universe came to be. You have immaterial darkness, then you have material darkness when darkness was separated from light. Then, through the incarnation of that consciousness in the form of a being, a sentient being, one who is able to ponder and consider one's own self, then you have that third layer of darkness, which is understanding, the ability to see not only with the physical eye, but also to see with the mind. Right? So in seeing with the mind, that third phase of that third stage of darkness is what we consider to be science of self or knowledge of self. It's recognizing that not only are you here on this planet for a purpose, but you are also connected to the all. So this is, a constant journey that each human being goes through. Particularly, I'm talking about the original man, original woman, first world people. because the concepts that I'm talking about are a part of our classic or ancient perspective of who we actually are. You know? So these are some of the things that I am articulating what she's going through. When you see my elder queens, Sia and Aziza, you also see evidence of the exact same perspective. You know, I invested the same type of time. Now that I'm in my culture ciphers or in my 40s, I have a lot more experience and knowledge that I could add on to her. But, you know, one of the reasons why we consider our children to be the best part, or the understanding, is because understanding is a composite or a combination of knowledge and wisdom. It's impossible to have an understanding of something if there is no knowledge or no wisdom. Wisdom is also discernment or right judgment. So if a person don't know nothing or they're not aware, they're not going to have the capacity to rightly judge anything. There's not going to be a capacity for wisdom, which also means, how can they understand anything? You know? So knowledge, wisdom, understanding is the exact same thing as man, woman, and child. And we consider the child to be the best part because the child is a composite or the remark of that knowledge and wisdom. It's the evidence in the form of 3 dimensions, length, width, and depth. It's the evidence of what that knowledge and wisdom is in form. So when you look at knowledge and wisdom too, you look at the 12th letter in our alphabet, which is L, which represents love. So, you know, our children are the highest expression of what love is. The highest expression. Because think about it. No matter how you have defined the love that you've experienced in your life, personally or individually, that love will have a sad birth record to it, or will end once you leave this physical plane, once you die, unless that love becomes transgenerational. And the only way to make love transgenerational is through the manifestation of the child, the creation of a child. You know? But, Anusha. Yo, what if she just start talking, y'all? Y'all be like, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised. You want to say something? Say peace. Anusha. Anusha. Say peace. Hey. Hey. How you doing? Hey.
Hi. Hi, Peanut. I brought donuts.
Thank you. How you
Do
doing,
you know
bro?
Tommy?
Yeah, I met you before. What's going on?
We just
What's
went
the
to
necklace?
the book corner.
Oh,
What is that?
it's a medal.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, how are you?
Excellent.
Are you hanging with Dad?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how old
Thank
is
you.
she?
4 months.
Where's the time go?
Yeah.
Do you want me to put these in the bag? Saladin, do you
Yeah,
want me to
that's
get you one?
No,
Are
I'm fine.
you sure?
Yeah,
I can bring a napkin up.
no, I'm fine because no sugar right now because I haven't ate anything. But if I eat sugar right now, I'm gonna be like this.
Okay. All right. Do you want something from the bag?
No thanks. I'm good.
All right. I'll put this in
Yeah.
the bag and I'll come
Thank
back
you.
up. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, tell everybody peace. Say peace. That's my queen. Peace.